The prologue and the epilogue were the first pieces that we made. The angel actually is just, we found it from an archive and we put gold effects on it, gold painting effects on it, and left it as is. Just as it is, it's a manifestation again of what Saints and Sinner is. You got an angel holding a timepiece or an hourglass and a hand on a skull. And it also reflected the concept of memento mori, which was we found it in a cemetery, or we found it as a statue that belongs in a cemetery. And it had those two dual pieces in its hands, time and death. And so when we saw that, I immediately was like, take this, put it in the folder. This is something that we'll use. The prologue, on the other hand, was, I actually made that. I took two different pieces and I merged them together, and basically in a very almost like sanding it down, I blended the two together. And that actually came from a piece that you had sent me. The human side is actually a real artifact in a museum, and you had sent it to me because you found it on somebody's Instagram story. And you were like, what do you think about this? And I was like, oh, I'm gonna grab that and I'm gonna merge it with a skull, and it's just gonna be a piece for Saints and Sinners.
Yeah.
And that's why these pieces originally were just gonna stand on their own, because they illustrated perfectly Saints and Sinners as a concept.
Right, which is something that people continue to ask us about, and so we had thought that made sense just to go into it. It still did, but like many things, it then began to spin a lot more thought around time and death.
Right, yeah. And what was actually funny about it too was I had gone to the Met Museum in 2018. It was at the end of 2018. And while I was there, I saw these ancient Native American masks, and they had dual sides to them. So you could wear them front and back, or you could wear them on the side. And one side was a very demonic looking human or animal, and then on the other side it was a more divine goddess-like being. And I was like, I'm taking a picture of this and I'm sending it to Joe, because this is totally Saints and Sinners. And when I sent it to her, she was just like, I can't look away from that. Like, that's such a great illustration and image of the duality of humanity and just the relationship between good and evil. And I'm like, I don't know if we'll ever use this, but here it is.
Here it is, right.
And it was more concept talk and more conversational than anything. And so fast forwarding to making this here at the end of 2019, it was like, this is coming back in. And it was cool to see God plants these little things that you can then reference back to. And it's just like he's weaving this whole story. I'm like, oh, this is way too cool to reference back of a piece of inspiration and now using it again. I don't know, it was way cool to see that.
And it also flows along in the lines of thought of many times, I think, across multiple creative endeavors, you hit things that inspire you and you don't know what an application for them would be. And so I think it also speaks to the value of just holding and sitting on them and not feeling like the pressure to perform or to make something if you don't have an application for it yet. Because just that thought has value, and what it does as you process and think about it and just hold on to it until it has an expression. Because when you brought this out, there was zero questioning, which often we don't have crazy questions going back and forth since we think similarly, but it was still an immediate recognition of this is where the concept has been, this is how it's manifested now, and it fits perfectly, seamlessly. It was a perfect fit.
Yeah. And weren't these pieces that we were actually ready to discard?
Yeah.
Didn't we actually want to get rid of them at some point?
Yeah. Because we weren't sure how they didn't fit into first collection. They didn't fit where we thought second collection was going. And so it was like, well, maybe this is just something we either print as a standalone, or maybe we just set it aside altogether. Again, we'll come back to it someday, but maybe it's not for today.
Yeah. And we wanted to kind of keep them as one-off pieces, and then we were like, no, we should maybe make them as introductory pieces to the second collection. And then we took that idea away. We were just like, still don't know what to do with these. Because when you look at them, even with the fonts on the sleeves, they're a different color.
Yeah.
But they're also colors that match each other. So it's like, wait, these two things go together.
They go together.
But then the rest of the collection is kind of a
Very
different.
distinct look.
Yeah. So they both had two different looks. And when we were making the other 4, when we were putting it on the website, we were like, okay, do we put titles to these? Mm-hmm. And then you were like, just do chapters again, because it's still a story. And I'm like, okay, so then what do we do with these 2? Yeah. And she's like, prologue and epilogue. Just immediately, that was her first response. And I'm like, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, because it's what it is. It's like that forethought and then the afterthought, but they still are cohesive with the story.
Right.
And it was just a place of like kind of sitting back and like, it felt like a relief to be like, yeah, that's how they fit. They do fit.
Yeah.
Because we kept circling back to them. And neither one of us, we discarded many designs in this process. Not as many as the first, but we still discarded stuff. And so it was a cool place to just hit that stasis of like, yep, this is it. We're going to go forward. This makes sense. And we can put something cool out there.
Yeah, and that's something about the prologue and the epilogue as they're known now, is they don't really have a lot of like story and meaning behind them. They're just statement pieces. Like you look at that and you're like, oh, that's saint and sinner. And then you look at the angel, oh, that's very much saint and sinner, like evil versus good. And so when we made them, that was another reason we want to get rid of them, because it was just like,
there wasn't anything.
Yeah, there's not much in there. That's all there is. And so that was another reason that we wanted to discard them. And so, I mean, we go through so many conversations of discard or not, is this still relevant to this? And ultimately it was just like, no, let's just put some staple pieces in there. And they still fit in this narrative.
Right.
They still fit.
Right. Also, they were the first place where we had tried putting the Saint and Sinner big on the long sleeve. And so that was something that was fitting in a prologue kind of way, because it's what set that standard for the next 4 T-shirts to have the Saints and Sinners big font blown up on the sides, and it actually helped steer us away from T-shirts for this collection.
Right. Yeah.
The short sleeves.
Right, and that was making the font. The font was actually from first collection, and the font was not going to go on any garment.
Yeah,
it was for our website.
For the website, something we use.
And I wanted to make something very different for our website on our first collection launch. And I was like, what if we made our own custom font? And by we, I meant Joe, because I don't know how to paint. Yeah. And so I was like, what would you think? So I basically made up like this story behind this font. And I was like, picture someone who's in prison and all they have is like their finger or like a brush, and they're writing on the walls. That's how I want this to look. And so we basically made up this. She came up with like painted strokes on really grainy paper or textured paper. And
there's not a lot of ink, so you can see
the
dry bristles.
Right.
Which isn't technically correct.
Yeah,
but
right.
It was where it was going.
Exactly. And so I was like, I want this. So for the website, I wanted it to look like the website, the page, like if you were to view it on a computer screen or an iPhone screen or whatever screen, it would look like it was a wall. And so that's what I wanted it to look like. And then we were like, let's bring that font back out and use it on the sleeves. Like that would look crazy.
We were really excited once we saw how the sleeve prints translated. And so we kind of continued to step it out from there, and we incorporated it in using it for the phrase memento mori that's found throughout chapters 1 through 4. Which is a deviation from things we had done in the first collection, just because we had steered clear of using text by and large. And as we continued to find further application for the font that we really liked, we were like, okay, this isn't just a website font. We're going to make this our exclusive. This is our branded Saints and Sinners font. It's what we are using exclusively on our designs. It's a kind of a benchmark that we've set for ourselves, and just wanting to make things ours and make it something unique. It's not something you just pulled off or that you'll see anywhere else. And so it was also a, kind of a creative take on making something exclusive, I guess.
And it adds more of the personal touch that Joe and I have. And it's also a pride thing. Like this is what we've made. We didn't steal this from someone. We didn't buy this font. Like we made it from scratch, and we took the brush strokes that were on these pages, we threw them in Photoshop, we pieced them individually together, and they're like this whole font, and it brings the creative pride of it to a higher level of just like, this font that we have is made exclusively by us. And it's like every brush stroke has care, every edit and every piece was carefully edited and almost like surgically edited.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of weight that we put on this font, even though that some people would be like, it's just a font. It's just like, we get emotional about fonts.
Reads a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it's just another way of us to show you as the consumer or as people who view whatever it is that we make, like, we care a lot about this stuff.
Right.
And everything is very customized to the way that we want it to look. And again, it illustrates the story, the concept, the narrative, and the aesthetic of it. It's just like, there's certain fonts that were like, that's still not it, and it still isn't like graphic or gothic enough, like, let's make our own. And that's what we did. So
Right.
if you can't find it, our motto is always, if you can't find it, just make it yourself. And that's what we did.